Researchers in France in 2013 started doing some research, and they discovered in France up to a third of all students struggle with handwriting. Of course, in that group, some of these kids actually have dysgraphia, and some of them just have poor handwriting skills. So they were determined to try to figure out different ways to diagnose dysgraphia than are currently being used in France. Currently, the evaluation tool for children's handwriting is what they usually use to diagnose dysgraphia. There's a concise evaluation scale, and it assesses cursive handwriting, which is to be noted that I believe in the article France still teaches cursive a lot more than in the US today, so they did assess using cursive handwriting. They discovered that standard ways of diagnosing dysgraphia can be subjective at times. Observing pencil grasp can be objective depending on who is watching it. Pencil pressure on the paper. Obviously, darker marks mean that the child is pressing harder. However, it's still kind of subjective to the person doing the evaluation on what is excessive and what is normal and what is too soft and where those boundaries lie. Hand manipulation is another thing that requires an observer to really watch the child. Paper position, body posture, and fatigue is another thing that often kids with dysgraphia have lots of fatigue in their hand, and sometimes that's hard to observe and to calculate a value. Plus, you can't always rely on the kids to give you an accurate measure of that because some kids might complain more than others. So there's a lot of variables going in to diagnosing dysgraphia currently. In this study, they took three groups of kids, three groups of individuals. One group was kids with dysgraphia. They've already been diagnosed with dysgraphia. Another group was just typical kids who have normal handwriting. And a third group, they used a group of adults to compare their handwriting. They used research and they used a tablet to evaluate their handwriting. Just new technology is making new tests available. And in this study, they used a tablet that was able to measure movements on the tablet, the speed at which they wrote the letters, pencil pressure on the tablet, and by these values, they could be scientifically compared to thousands of handwriting samples to really evaluate the student and what they were doing. Dysgraphia can have several different characteristics. Typical characteristics include long total pencil movement. It takes them a long time to form the letters. Dysgraphic children tend to write larger on the piece of paper. Not always, but that is a key sign. They have more starts and stops of their letter formation. They'll stop in the middle of it, they'll stop between letters, and they'll stop between words longer than a typical student. And just an overall disfluency of handwriting movements are other things that typically kids with dysgraphia do. On the study, children could hold the stylus and the tablet any way they felt comfortable. So they were encouraged to hold it just like they hold a piece of paper. Students were given common French words, so they weren't words that they're not familiar with, common words that they could all easily spell to write on the test. They had the students write each word 8 times, and they calibrated an average in between, an average of how they wrote them, how long it took to form each letter, how large each letter was, and they calculated several things in that test as an average of the 8 times they wrote the words. They took careful measures to calibrate the stylus because that was the pressure. That was how they were measuring pressure on how hard the students wrote on the tablet. And they were able to get a lot more details that you wouldn't have just been able to get by a teacher giving the test on a piece of paper. The test analyzed their quality of their letters, how they were legible, and how they conformed to normal standards. It also analyzed the speed of how they wrote their letters and just the ability to write words without losing functional time, and how the speed compared to average people without dysgraphia. Kids with dysgraphia on the test showed that they had more lifts of their pencil between letters. Keep in mind, this is cursive, so in theory, there shouldn't have been lifts at all between the letters, but kids with dysgraphia were still lifting their pencil during letters. There's often also lifts during formation of the individual letters with kids with dysgraphia. There was a lower frequency of speed, and they noticed when they wrote certain letters in the French alphabet that are lesser used, the kids took longer to write those letters than more frequent letters in their alphabet. So that was interesting. Also, the kids tended to write larger with the dysgraphia. Tablets are a really big breakthrough because they can really give us those details with a kid that would not really be able to be measured. Keep in mind how fast you write. The tablets have the ability to localize how much time just like each stroke is taking a child, and it would be really hard. It would be impossible almost as a teacher to like stopwatch every single little mark on the page as someone is writing a cursive word. So it also is able to pinpoint to help interventions. If they're just really slow at writing the letter V, then interventions can be done on those specific letters, and there might be a stroke of a certain letter that gives them more trouble, and just helping that one stroke can make them more fluent. So it helps guide interventions. And the tablet and the way of doing this electronically just picks up on abnormal fluctuations that human observers might never notice because they're so minor to pick up and detect with the eye. So the tablet really is an awesome tool to be able to be used. The tablet, of course, does not help all things. Hand position still needs to be observed by the teacher. Also, just the position of the paper and pencil grasp. All of those things are still going to be subjective, but by using the tablet and technology to analyze the speed and the formation and where they're having problems in the breakdown is a great tool. It's also just a really good tool to have to analyze what's really dysgraphia and what is just really poor handwriting that the child didn't have much help on and their letter formations as in younger grades. So hope that was helping, but that's diagnosing with a tablet and with software.